Just like children sleeping, we could dream this night away. There's a full moon rising.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, grasshoppers. I see we have just a little adjustment to make in our content display here. Just a moment. We seem to be cut off a little bit at the top. There. And on the bottom. Pull it down a little bit if needed. Give some space for the title. We're looking at the first of roughly 155 golden games. The book that we are pulling from should be right around the corner here, is the Informant's 1000 Best of the Best. Now, this is an incredible book with the top 10 games from each informant for the first 100 informants, and they are in order of descending importance. So in other words, while you get an opening index and you get amazing commentators and you get universal languages, the most important thing I believe in this is that as you go through each chapter, chapter number 1 are the best 10 games from the very first informant. Chess Informant has been around since 1966. We have it in the top left portion of our screen, and you can see that in the first informant, Spassky versus Petrosian is listed here, and they have 10 judges. In this particular case, it was Averbach, Duritz Drago, Somm, Laszlo Somm, Filipowicz, Yefim Geller, Lauren Georgiou, Gipsless, and Kovalek, and they all graded each of the games based on whether in order of importance from 10 down to 1. And they had many more games than just these 10, by the way. As you can see that some of the numbers don't have votes. Like their number 1 choice is very much dropped off the map in many cases. For example, Filipowicz voted the game Vaswikov Littlewood, which turned out to be number 9, as the least important of his group, while Ludikov Vilimorovich, which is an extremely exciting game, was voted as his worst of 10. Now, of course, we will go on to the next game, Portish versus Johansson, in a Moran variation. That will be a very exciting game. We're going to do that one next. Although this game has some similarities to another very important game from the 1800s with a pawn storm on the Kingside. That is a strategic plan used very much today. And you'll see it in this game as we discover the best possible defense against a queen pawn opening. Now, queen pawn openings could begin with knight f3. Queen pawn openings could be also beginning with bishop f4. Many of you might call this the London, or the accelerated London, as very often knight f3 followed by bishop f4 is the traditional London variation, with pawns going to c3 and e3. And as it turns out, this is just another queen pawn opening. And as I mentioned in a stream earlier that I had rated, all you really need as black is your own personal way of handling each of these variations. Crank down the music just a little bit. Now, hopefully it wasn't drowning me out too much before. However, in this particular case, and I did use this opening, which was also played by Petrosian as white, Spassky, world champion in 1969. It is the year is 1966, so this is Boris Spassky's first attempt to challenge Petrosian for the World Chess Championship. And the move E6, of course, is part of Petrosian's repertoire, whether he's going to be playing the Nimzo Indian, or the Queen's Garrett declined, or the Queen's Indian in this particular case. The Queen's Indian would be C4, B6. The move C5 was hardly in the repertoire of many of the strongest players in the World Chess Championship, but the move C4 wasn't in the cards today, as the Torre Attack appears on the board. Now, personally, I believe in C5 against almost all queen-pawn openings, whether it's the Verisov, the Coley, the Zukertort Coley, the London, the Torre Attack, and a variety of others, early Fianchetto variations. For example, another early Fianchetto, another early queen-pawn opening might even begin with G3. A queen-pawn opening is really defined as any opening that does not involve C4. And we don't know that yet, therefore there's a lot of bobbing and weaving as we need to go through in this particular case, developing our pieces as black without knowing whether or not white is going to play a main line. So we have to walk a fine thread depending on what our preferred defenses are as black. Now, personally, against the London, and against the Coley, and against the Torre, because the center doesn't become open, I'm a firm believer in hesitating on castling as black. You don't need to castle on the king side. After all, white's bishop, very often, in this particular case, Petrosian gives him control of the E5 square with D5. I also don't like to do that. I like to keep my D pawn back in order to play D6, and if necessary, to fight for the E5 square. And Petrosian, of course, already threatening E4. For example, when Bobby Fischer had his anti-Queen's Pawn systems, Bobby Fischer would answer with G6. And moves like bishop to G5 could run into knight E4, or simply bishop to G7. And depending on how white goes about
Darkblade
it, right?
512
said Halo.
How are you, Darkblade? Good morning. And after the move knight on b to d2 with the threat of e4, only now are we somewhat forced to play the move d5. There is a game in 60 memorable games. I'm not entirely positive if Bobby Fischer had answered bishop f4 with an early d6, or for whatever reason he had an early d6 in, and when the opponent played knight on b to d2, Bobby Fischer actually spent an extra tempo to prevent white from grabbing a classical center with e4. And he commented on it in my 60 memorable games, mentioning that it is worth it as black to prevent white from building a big center, to lose a move of time. So in this particular game, after knight f3, e6, bishop to g5, I have to mention this is no slight on the power and potent poison that many variations of the Torre Attack represent. How Petrosian deals with it here. It was just a little bit of a matter of ambition on Spassky's part that did him in. Well, for the most part, in order to control the e4 square, Petrosian decides to break the pin of the knight. And there will be pressure on e4 if the bishop takes too soon. So the game continues with the very natural development, bishop to d3. Now this is what I mean by not castling early against Coley systems.
Said
Not castling early against London systems. Good morning, Lauren. So if you are playing black against a queen pawn opening and you have not necessarily threaded your way through the idea of your repertoire versus classical systems with d4 involved, and people bobbing and weaving with these move order differences in order to get around here, one thing is for certain: the bishop will be arriving on d3 against everything except g6 systems. If black has his pawn on g6, you'll notice that the London is not necessarily so effective. I would also even go further to say that you're not playing the London if black hasn't played the move d5. You're still possibly playing a king's Indian defense against the queen pawn opening or something along those lines. How are you, Lauren? How's everything been? A little late in the day for you, I know. Earlier, when a person asked about a specific system against queen pawn openings that works against everything, I mentioned not only early c5s, but just having one system that works well for you. I know that if I go back one move, the move b6 is also relatively straightforward. And in fact, after the move bishop to d3, it is not uncommon for many players to try to fight against that bishop with a later bishop to a6. Now, of course, it helps if this c pawn has committed itself.
Lorenzo
So by
33
playing the move castles,
Said,
if white were to castle,
AM here in Australia,
bishop
I'm okay,
a6
pretty close to quitting
sort of
chess
takes
forever,
away.
trying to not get to that point. I'm looking forward to your stream.
Well, quitting chess forever, that's quite something. Honestly, if anyone ever really gets to the point of quitting chess, I feel like it's possible that you're taking it almost too seriously. The pieces and the pawns are merely tools for our enjoyment in practicing decision making. And just like I think a tweet earlier today by Magnus Carlsen, he had phase one of his recovery plan in classical chess was to change his appearance. Did not work so well. I think he lost to Fabiano Caruana. And then his phase two today is to just sack a pawn in the opening, grab control of the center, and see what happens. And we'll see how well that works out. I know that earlier, I believe he beat Gukesh, or one of the rising stars of the Indian chess community. It was 2 hours ago that he made that statement. He's just going to sack a pawn and play like he used to. In fact, if you remember correctly, I believe in the first game of the World Championship match a couple of years back against Nepomniachtchi, he actually just played the move knight a5 to get the bishop pair against Enroute Lopez and just gave away his e5 pawn. And he did just fine in that game. In fact, he had the initiative at various points. So there's something to be said for his approach. Something to be said for his approach. Remember to have fun. One of the prime ingredients to being a success at anything is to truly just enjoy it and have a passion for it that is not quelled by results or
Said,
hurrying your progress.
For me, it's not taking it too serious. I just keep losing. I'm on a massive losing poor form for months now. I think I'm broken or something. I'm trying to wait it out, but haven't seen the sun yet.
Ah, losing. Well, there are two sides to a coin. And one side is winning and one side is losing, and we rarely land on that narrow edge, which is a draw. But honestly, losing is learning for the most part. Changing it up, doing something different, identifying what's going on in your game is key. Okay? Try to basically identify what is going wrong and or what about the position you didn't like, and just change it up if you can. I know that I don't have any absolute answers, but one thing you can do for yourself is just to change it up and start playing different openings. I often notice that many players, when they play the same opening for perhaps a month or two too long, they get a little stale, stagnant, and they stop looking
Lorenzo
at the
33
position for what it is.
Said, when I lose and I see every single opponent getting or inaccuracies and mistakes and blunders, my heart just breaks. I feel I have to play perfect stockfish or I lose.
Oh, please. I understand that we all strive for perfect stockfish, and we all think that we need perfect stockfish, or as I like to call them, Bruce weapons. But in reality, chess is a game of mistakes, and the 30-second review of the game on Lee Chess or on chess.com is not that accurate. Sometimes they will give brilliant to a move that is not quite that brilliant. They might give best move to a move that is actually quite common in strong player circles. Getting back to our game, though, we'll address this separately, Lauren. I just want to mention that Black develops his knight on b to d7 in an effort to perhaps not just concentrate on the occupation of e4 with backup, but also to prepare the move c5 that I was talking about. No worries. In this event, White does bring out his bishop to d3. The pawn on d5 is restricting e4, and Black does counterattack with c5 in this particular position. White supports his center with c3, and as I mentioned before, we do have to do something about our light squared bishop, whether it goes to a6 or not. He chooses b6, and when White castles, bishop to b7, and now White plays the move knight e5. Now both sides have played relatively perfectly in this game, but I have to admit that there are about 10 or 15 ways to arrive at this position perfectly without anyone accruing any inaccuracies or mistakes. There are so many good moves in chess that I'm not entirely sure what an inaccuracy means to a computer, but to me, as a human being, it means that you had to have followed up on your idea in the course of normal piece coordination. And that is absolutely key. Absolutely key. Now, this knight on e5 is extremely dangerous, and capturing it straight away is not the best move. In fact, chances are we should probably start trying to strive for creating counterplay on the queenside. Maybe, just maybe, we could slowly build up in the center with this. Or we could challenge the bishop with h6. But knight takes e5 is very committal. There are three types of moves that you cannot take back in chess. Number one are captures. If you make a capture, you have to know why it's good for you. If you don't know why it's good for you, then a capture will most certainly be bad for you. Okay, maybe not most certainly, but more than likely, all captures are bad for you unless you have a really, really good reason why they are good for you. That's a quote from Gregory Kaidanov. After d takes e5, White secures a certain space advantage, and Black immediately begins fighting against this e5 pawn now. Instead of exchanging pieces, you'll notice that Black does not have very much space. So Spassky chooses to keep the pieces on the board. And there's still nothing wrong with this particular position, and it is roughly level. But given the fact that White's king is committed to the king side, I would almost hazard a guess that Black could even be slightly better here with these bishops aiming in this particular direction and no pawn on d4. That was the first and foremost idea that Petrosian had. So rather than allowing the move d4, Petrosian's idea of d4, Spassky plays knight f3 to solidify his center, and now Black comes up with a particular plan, which I will give everyone 45 seconds to find. All right, 45 seconds to find. This is where we would like to try to find candidate moves for Black, and by candidate moves for Black, I mean throw 3 darts at this position in the form of moves, and they don't have to be best moves, just have to have some concepts, such as some of us might choose the move castling, some of us might choose the move a6, rook to c8. And I'm not ruling out any of those moves as possibilities. Castling queenside is also a possibility. Rolling the pawn up with a5 again. Relocating the queen off of that diagonal in order to chip away at the center with f6 could be probable. Again, we are going through the 1000 best of the best. You'll find the link to the book there. To me, this is like a modern masters of the chessboard with no English, just basically no rhetoric to try to confuse you, but symbols in the form of better is, with the initiative, a weakness, things like that. And I will try to point out a few things in particular case. Now, if you haven't already come up with 3 moves, I don't blame you, because Petrosian decided upon the move h6 as the first step, and Spassky responded in kind with b4, preventing a possible castling on the queenside. And once again, we're going to give you candidates for black an opportunity to choose 3 moves. We're going to try to keep this game within a reasonable number of moves. That is a minute per move. The game is roughly 43 moves long. We're going to try to keep it to that length. We're right on schedule, relatively, give or take our intro, 5 or 6 minutes. 3 moves for black in this position, perhaps even part of a conceptive bowl. I like to say, don't look for just one move and analyze just one move, because that's like having only one dart for a game of darts and then only throwing that one dart and expecting to get a bullseye. You're not going to get a bullseye by throwing only one dart. You may get a bullseye on the second or third after you've honed your delivery and your throw. And in this particular position, Petrosian follows up on his plan with the move g5 as part of a kingside pawn storm. Note that earlier I mentioned the committed white king. This is a closed center. There's no danger to the white king where he sits, sorry, to the black king where he sits. And in the closed center, the open game principle of castling quickly does not really apply anymore. One of the reasons why closed games are seen so much at the top level, because they like to break the rules. The bishop must retreat back to g3. And now we will do candidate moves for black again. This is all a part of the 1000 best of the best offered by Chess Informant, which has been the #1 instruction manual for grandmasters since the 1960s, used heavily by Bobby Fischer. You can find it as I retweeted Bobby Fischer studying a Chess Informant on the subway. We'll find it on my socials. They follow me by the same name on almost every platform. Follow me on Chessable, Twitter, Discord, Instagram as Master Chess Dojo, and YouTube. Let's not forget YouTube. We'll give YouTube here a very special shout out, because that is where most of you will be watching. So, the mainline move in this particular position, h5. How hard was it? We found h6, we found g5, we found h5, and our #1 target is the king. We have several moves, several candidates, even if you had one or the other along the way. Now, white feels relatively honor-bound to try to stop this. And the traditional method, even up to that time, was to blockade the pawns from being pushed. The only drawback here is that the knight and the bishop are both overworked by defending the pawn on e5, which are attacked by a knight and a queen. So when this pawn captures on h4, those pieces are a little bit overworked. But at the same time, much of the pawn storm has been stopped. Now black decides that we can no longer play down a rook. In other words, if you do not castle in any particular game and you wish to play on one side of the board, including the center, castling brings the rooks into the game. So by castling that rook on a8, is now traveling towards G8. And we cannot underestimate the ability to play with our rooks. Imagine if you don't castle, if you don't open lines, if you don't make a pawn break, but you'll be playing down 10 points of material. So therefore, white now begins with A4, and perhaps this was a little bit of an inaccuracy, as he might have wished to exchange on C5 first. Hard to say, as black closes up the lines with C4. In fact, I would say that's almost worthy of an exclam, because there is no more danger to our king in this particular case. And we need one more move to seal off white's attack, and that move is A6. By playing the move A6, no matter what pawn moves forward, black will seal up the queenside, sew it up permanently and perfectly with a pawn chain that cannot be broken. So therefore, white's king chooses to get off of the G file while black brings his rook to the G file. Notice that that rook stays on H8 in order to keep pressure on the king, while this rook opens up the G, takes its position on the open G file, and white tends to barnacle in this particular direction, a term given to me or imparted to me by my first chess coach, Charles Hertan, who wrote several really instructive books, which we will get into a little bit later. And now Petrosian actually expands even further by placing his rook on G4 and preparing the doubling of rooks. White connects his rooks with queen to D2. Black completes the doubling of the rooks and the pressure on the G2 pawn. We can also not underestimate this bishop on B7. So we might have to really consider the blockading of the D4 square in some manner, if it were at all possible. Now, in this particular position, it's possible that bringing another rook over to try to defend could have helped, or even just centralizing that rook to be able to try to stop the movement of black's D pawn. However, white decides to rush things a little bit. Now, this was not Spassky's best game, and he does not win this match in 1966. But he doesn't necessarily lose it either with his fine play. He does manage to hold level with Petrosian, even though Petrosian remains world champion at the end of this match. So we seal up the queenside as advertised previously. There's no way in, and the only play that is going to be happening will be either on the king side or in the center. And whenever you have an opponent attacking on the side of the board, ideally, your best bet is to seek counterplay in the center. So rook on A to D1, and black chooses to try to activate his bishop. Perhaps he's planning on playing bishop to G7 and put pressure on it from this particular angle. It's hard to say what his real intention behind bishop F8 is, but the idea of placing it on G7 seems perfectly logical. He doesn't quite make it there, as white plays knight H2, trying to chase away the rook, and this lends itself to another particular plan that I want to make it aware. I want you to make everyone aware of. Try not to make moves, or especially pawn moves, in the area where you are weakest. Let's just say your opponent is attacking your king side. You don't want to make pawn moves that might weaken your king side further. So therefore, in this particular case, we already know that by moving that knight away from the center, that Petrosian is not going to shirk from the opportunity to sacrifice his exchange, because he was well known for his exchange sacrifices. And the story behind that is that when he was a young man in the Pioneer's Palace chess community, however I wish to say it, Petrosian missed a pawn sacrifice or was so embarrassed by missing a pawn sacrifice, as it might have been pointed out by Botvinnik or his peers, that he chose to Never ever miss the opportunity for an exchange sacrifice again. Alright, so as it turns out, knight takes g4, h takes g4. We still have a rather unfortunate pin here, right? So as it turns out, with this unfortunate pin, we do have to take steps to relocate our bishop to d6. And after the move e4, remember white's seeking counterplay in the center. Whenever your opponent is attacked on the flank, seek counterplay in the center. So the move e4 is designed to break things open. It doesn't work quite according to plan though. After bishop to d6, this knight is ready to move. Bishop on f4 is unprotected. So Petrosian is already gearing up with both of his bishops in the direction of the king. And the rook on the open g file is going to be quite crazy. So Spassky finds the best move to barnacle with queen e3. And of course, Petrosian has been making very close to the best move so far. The idea of this queen invading on the king side is something to be concerned about. And it's hard to say that any exchanges, if you don't know whether or not they're going to be good for you, might be bad for you. The Petrosian simply seeks the exchange of the defender of the dark squares and bishop on f4. And after bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, Spassky makes an interminable error here. He should just barnacle, try to lock down on the position with rook to d2, and instead places his rook on d4, which allows not just to e5, but after rook d2, where the rook should have gone in the first place, the move f5, cracking open the center as violently as possible. You'll notice nothing is defending that pawn. This is not unlike how Magnus Carlsen said, I'm just going to sacrifice a pawn, grab the initiative, control the center, and do whatever it takes to be able to overwhelm his opponents. Basically, he's the better player, and he can do it. So in this particular position, while I would like to secure a moment for white to choose candidate moves on the defensive side, basically this is a decisive advantage for black, and it's very difficult to choose from a number of really difficult moves. For example, white probably could have tried f3, and after f4, queen a7. The forces would be marshaled on the king side with knight f6, and this would not change anything at all. So going back in time, and I said before, exchanges of pieces cannot be taken back. Pawn moves cannot be taken back. They don't move backwards. He is rather committal here. He plays the move e takes d5, and this somewhat closes off the center until Petrosian wishes it to be open by capturing that pawn. This move closes off the center. The pawn storm continues. See the pawn front coming toward him. The knight prying into position, a temporary queen check to dismantle things, and a little bit delayed an f3. Now, of course, we need to chase the queen off that diagonal, and at the same time, when we fix this pawn on g2, we're actually creating another opportunity for a pawn break, and it's this moment that Spassky realizes that he better be able to get his king out of danger, so he chooses rook to e1. And of course now black breaks through with h3. Bishop f1. And of course there are so many good moves that work for black in this particular position. I just want you to take a few moments. We've been flying along so far to keep everybody involved. Take roughly a minute to choose candidate moves for black in this. Again, we are choosing games from the Chess Informant 155, just happens to be the latest of the greatest issues that are available so far. And this particular book 1000 best of the best. You get 1000 games in this volume, and you can find it at chessinformant.com. I primarily mention this for your own improvement. If you go through these games and try to reason for yourself and try to see with your own eyes why these moves are good or bad, that is the case. That will be the case that you will soon be thinking more like the masters and less like the Potzer that we used to be. So, several good moves could have been played in this position. We could have attempted to relocate our queen to the kingside with queen f8. We could have pushed e4 to try to break through with f3 and d2. We could also try to just protect this pawn and prepare a further break with rook to g5. But Petrosian chooses, rather than exchanging on g2 immediately, keep the tension with rook to h8. By keeping the tension with rook to h8, white cracks a little bit here, like perhaps the only move really is d takes h3. He can't allow the pawn to be taken with a double check, and he can't allow anything else to happen. Petrosian, of course, enables his worst placed piece to spring into the game. Remember, that bishop hadn't been doing anything so far in the game. And Spassky steps out of danger by playing king to g1. Obviously, we need the open file. Bishop takes f1, king takes f1. And once again, we're going to ask for several candidate moves for black. This is your chance to pause and consider what moves you might make. Now, there's more than one good move in this position, and Petrosian does not necessarily need to make the best one to win this game. And some of your candidate moves may also be candidate moves later. Now, I've been posting these games in our Discord under a daily Golden Games assignment without annotations, so that you might be able to go over them. So if you join the Discord, you'll be able to take part in this lesson-like study, basically going over a couple of games every few days. I have 4 assignments posted. I'm not going to post any more until I have caught up in doing the YouTube videos of the 16 games already given. Basically 2 games a day, 4 assignments, 8 games, I should say, not the 16 games already given. Could well have been 16 games. I have the printout right here. Let me just take a quick peek. Golden Games assignment number 4 does have 4 games, so there are 4 games in each assignment. You can choose to study them in any order, by length, by opening, by player, because Fisher features prominently in the 1960s as we are doing Informants number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and we're actually up to Chess Informant number 16 already in our Golden Games assignment. So if you haven't chosen a move yet, Petrosian actually chose the move e4, which was not necessarily the best move. The square e3 is beckoning, so it's possible that knight to d5 was possibly the best move. Another move that needed to be really seriously considered was queen to d7. Diving into the queenside, diving in on the king's position very, very seriously. We'll give that one an exclam as well. Now, there can be more than one exclamation mark move, as they all lead to the logical conclusion that you wish to happen. In this particular case, with the move e4, Petrosian is cracking down, breaking through, and of course the move e takes f3, queen takes f3, allows white to try to put up some defensive issues, but we're going to go with it again. Candidate moves for black, because once again Petrosian does not necessarily find the best move, but he finds the move that follows up on his soulful interpretation of how the game should continue. Again, all of your previous candidate moves are still good. So those moves, if they are not, have not been played already or they're not ruled out as illegal, would be the ones that you might want to consider.
Said. NG.
Knight to g4, Mr. ABC, indeed. Knight to g4 is the move that he played, even though it's not the best move, by the way. That was the move that was played. It is not the best move in the position. Possibly, personally, the best move in the position to me is queen to d7. Even though Bruce, our silicone friend, would prefer queen to e5, and with the idea of capturing the pawn on c3, and then possibly putting pressure on f3. I mean, come on. Queen e5, that's not a human move to me. Queen to d7 is very much a human move. And a world champion's knockout blow move? Yes, knight to g4.
Said. Queen moves blurred be romantic sack the knight.
Indeed, it's very difficult to turn down this knight sacrifice. And after the move, f takes g4. f3, white is facing certain death, doom, destruction, disaster, however you look at it. The Trojans forced Spassky to try to return some of the material. Please take my rook and pretend like nothing ever happened. And he attempts to run, and of course, after he takes the rook, Spassky actually resigned in this particular position. We met our goal to a great extent of finishing this game in the allotted amount of time. The possible continuation, of course, if he were to capture, he has to deal with rook h2 check, and the queen coming in as well with threats of mate, and it's going to be very, very hard to stop. We have all sorts of mate threats along with mating net. We also have the probability that if the king ran away to e2, that we could even dive in further with queen to f4, and while this queen might cover the dark squares, it only works temporarily, because after this particular check, the pawns will be promoting, and a king and queen against the king will be inevitable. Thank you all for being here. We don't have that many. I appreciate you. However, you may follow these games in the instruction section on the Discord. We will create a Golden Games playlist. Please subscribe to YouTube and ring the bell for notification. Thank you so much. Don't forget, Chess Informant providing these games for you.
GG.
First person to suggest a raid. Let's go somewhere. Let's raid chess. There we go. Yeah, I noticed that they've cut off all their raid settings. There's no way anyone can raid them anymore. We're gonna raid Anamaya, but we haven't raided in some time. Well, let's cancel that one. She's got something else going on. I do not see her on screen. I'll send you over to Tosh Queen. And hopefully all three of you will make it. Namaste. Cheers and ciao everyone. Please be certain to subscribe to Chess Informant and enjoy. Join the Discord and follow me on my socials. Thank you very much. Cheers and ciao.
Darkblade 512
Said. Oh, nice rating, Tosh. I beat her earlier today.
Oh, you're so mean, Darkblade. Have a great day, everyone. I'll be back with game number 2.